How do you handle the Las Vegas backfield in Week 17? What should your trust level be in Ezekiel Elliott with everything on the line? And how do you make all the right calls with so many injury questions with a pair of $1 million grand prizes at stake? Plus, the FFPC main event leader, Mike Mann, will swing in to break down the Texans with the return of C.J. Stroud, why Ty Chandler might be a must-start for you in championship week, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Ferrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Can't stand the pressure. I've seen greater men that need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Welcome in. Thank you, Rob, and greetings and salutations to all you bulkaholics and Ferrelliacs for that matter. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com, myffpc.com, the home of the Fantasy Football Players Championship, myffpc.com. I am your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Mr. Ferrell Elliott. Coming up on tonight's show, Ferrell and I are going to jockey for position on the Arizona pass catchers without Marquise Brown in Week 17, whether Patrick Mahomes needs to be benched again, and much more. Plus, the FFPC main event leader with just 1 week to go, Mike Mann, is going to drop by for a conversation on Stephon Diggs, whether he should be in your lineup this week, the Miami Dolphins without Jalen Waddle, and much more. If you want to connect with us on the X machine, you can do so at hsffhour, that's the show, at Eric Balkman, that's me. And of course, check out the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at kffsc.com. That's kffsc.com. That's the one that Ferrell runs. It's the one I'm participating in. Fingers crossed for a big Week 17 for me there. And you can post on our Facebook page at facebook.com/hsffhour as well. Email the show, as so many of you have and so many of you continued to do over the last few years. highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for us, definitely send them in now. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, all the tweets and the emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer, my best friend Bryce, and our producer and mutual friend Rob. Want to remind everybody about some things that are going on with the FFPC right now as we are doing our final show of 2023. Anytime we do our final show of the year, it means things are brewing and things are about ready to go and kick off here with the FFPC. One of those things is something we've been doing all season. It's the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Just go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com, and play in the Weekly Challenge. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. You just choose 10 players or 12 players by the cutoff tomorrow, which I believe is, I want to say 8:15 Eastern time. And then Sunday, obviously by 1 p.m. We have one game tomorrow. The Lions and Cowboys, actually the highest total of the week too in that game. So you probably want to get those guys in on your weekly challenge rosters. Remember, only one player per NFL team. You want Goff, you can't have Amon-Ra St. Brown. You want CeeDee Lamb, you can't have Dak Prescott. $35 to enter, or you can enter for $200 as well. You can win up to $2,500. The rules for this are the exact same as the world famous FFPC playoff challenges. Two great contests, and it is the same awesome format you've been playing in for damn near the better part of 2 decades here. No draft or salary cap. Just choose the 12 players you want to go throughout the rest of the postseason. By the first game of wildcard weekend, that's what locks your roster in. And once your roster is locked in, you just watch those points pile up for the duration of the postseason, all the way up to the big game, or if the NFL's not watching, the Super Bowl. You get double points for that as well. So make sure anybody you pick, make sure you got 2 guys in there that you feel are going to get buku points, double points in the Super Bowl as well. You can win up to $500,000. Yeah, that's right. We have a $500,000 grand prize if you want to enter at the $200 level. If you just want to enter at the $35 level, hey, you're going to have a lot of fun as well, and you could still win $100,000. That's at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share, and get notified every time we go live. Share it with your friends, share it with your enemies. A guy who I would never, ever in a million years consider my enemy is the guy I want to bring on right now. At KFFSC Official, at Ferrell Elliott on the X, of course, kffsc.com. My good friend and the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, the one, the only, the Ferrell Elliott. Ferrell, it's our final show of 2023. I will wish you an early, happy 2024, my friend.
Oh, buddy, doesn't that sound great? 2024, and you're coming in it very clean. Look at this haircut and beard wags you got going on. The skin looks good. Looks like Christmas was good to you. You're throwing around French words like beaucoup in the introduction. And, I'm just impressed with everything you got going on. And the Dizzle is in the chat room.
It's going to be a great night, right? We can't help but have it be a great night.
What a way to say so long to 2023.
It's a good way to do it. And probably even a better way to do it is attack some of these questions we're already getting in the chat room right now. Our resident Ivy League professor leading things off tonight. Fantasy Pros issued bold predictions for Week 17, and one of them is that Saquon Barkley is going to be a massive bust this week. Do we agree with that, Ferrell? The New York Giants are taking on the Los Angeles Rams at home, and they're a home dog. I think it's a 5.5-point deficit the Giants are facing this week against the Rams. It's Aaron Donald. And not a ton else on that Rams defense, but by hook or by crook, they've been ham and egging it the second half of the season and putting together some decent performances. Do you think Saquon Barkley is a massive bust this week? And I guess the point we need to ask is he a guy that you want to bench this week in favor of, if you have some other options? You think about Jahmyr Gibbs, you think about Kenneth Walker, Tony Pollard, all guys that might have been drafted after Barkley. Maybe you could start one of those guys in place of Barkley. Do you view Barkley as a bust this week in Week 17?
For such a really smart guy, Hudson Kern-Reeves has a lot of questions. I mean, they're good questions. We need a little context. Does he have information about Barkley that we don't know? I've seen
the only thing he's saying is that Fantasy Pros in their bold predictions post listed Barkley as a massive bust this week.
They're just trying to get attention. That's all those, they're just trying to get attention. I mean, why would Barkley be a bust? The Rams defense is a stout defense when they decide to show up and play. They're doing so very, very well this year with the end of the season. But Barkley is a true professional, and he is one of the things that this team has. Okay, I'll make a giant prediction. Let's don't talk about bust. Let's go back to the tight end. I'm going to predict that Waller has a big game. What do you think?
Really?
Yeah, I think that his relationship with the backup quarterback Taylor is a good one. I think they probably spent time lamenting about their season and like to go out on a bang. So there's my positive prediction.
There's a positive about Darren Waller. You don't get that everywhere.
Not everywhere, but maybe it'll get somebody's attention, just like Fantasy Pros did.
James Hicks, our good buddy, he has a lineup decision here, Ferrell. He has to sit one of these guys: Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard, James Cook, or Alvin Kamara. Certainly, this is not an enviable. I guess it's an enviable position to be in if it's like week 2 or 3. But week 17, you got to narrow it down between these guys. This is a really, really tough decision to make. Kamara, I think, missed practice today, but it's an illness, so I'm not necessarily too concerned about that. I still love James Cook. I mean, outside of last week, he's been putting up big numbers here too. I think it comes down to Bijan Robinson or Tony Pollard. The fact that that game is such a high total on Saturday night, I think like 52.5, 53 right now. Hard for me to say like, oh, you're going to bench Tony Pollard. So I think I'm going to start him. I can't believe I'm saying this. My co-host for my local fantasy football show is saying, finally, Balky, you've come over to the dark side. I'm saying bench Bijan Robinson here.
Absolutely not. You're going to bench Pollard because Bijan can score anywhere on the field, and Pollard is unlikely to score within the 10-yard line. There's been a lot of problems with that. That's what we're going to do. It depends what you need. But all of those players, let's just play the guys that have the biggest opportunity to make the biggest plays and score you the most points in fantasy football. But I'm not answering that James Hicks question until I get a commitment from him of playing in the Sunday Sweet 16. Which I think he was sitting on the fence. I think he may have fallen over to the proverbial dark side as you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about
the Dizzle chimed in with something. You want to bench a guy like that?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Like, I can't. I'm a weak man, Ferrell. I cannot bench Barkley this week, and I won't bench Barkley this week.
No.
Ricardo Martinez has a Seattle Seahawks question here. Zach Charbonnet or Jackson Smith-Njigba. They're obviously both on the same team, which means they're both at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm playing JSN over Charbonnet this week.
I am too. What might be? What's the total on that one? Do you have it at your fingertips?
I will shortly. Go ahead.
Well, it's a situation there where that could become a chaser game. I think we were all pretty surprised by what Rudolph did at quarterback for Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And so I expect that offense to travel and put some points on the board, and Seattle will have to react in kind.
41.5 is what I'm looking at.
That's a low number, but we'll see.
By the way, everybody's agreeing with you on that Hicks question. Dizzle's saying bench Pollard. Hudson Kern-Reeve is saying bench Pollard. He also says start Jackson Smith-Njigba. Chiming in with Zach Charbonnet may not start. Yeah, Kenneth Walker could be playing.
I love when the Dizzle agrees with me. He also agrees that Hicks should hurry up and sign up for Super Bowl. That's a whole other thing.
Right, exactly.
Everybody, I thought that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, no. And I should be. That's all we should be talking about, quite frankly. Bijan Robinson, the other thing, too, as the Dizzle brings this up, is dude's catching a lot of passes, or at least getting thrown to a lot of, getting a lot of attempts at pass catches, which is huge in fantasy football. So I don't know. Maybe I got to rethink the Pollard thing, but I'm telling you that game could be a massive, massive game for Pollard. Go ahead, Ferrell.
And John Terry's got a comment that would make you believe that he opened for Rodney Dangerfield back in the days.
Right.
That's a good one too.
Yeah, for those of you who had Dolly Parton on your hsffhour bingo card, go ahead and cross that off tonight.
She's a Dallas Cowboy part-time cheerleader. Thanksgiving weekend. I saw it.
That's true.
Yep.
Yeah, what a performance that she put on too.
She was great.
I wasn't as huge of a fan as Tony Romo was. But I was a fan.
Tony gets excited.
John Terry chiming in. He's really beat up. He needs two from this pool of players. Demarcus Robinson from the Rams, Tyjae Spears from the Titans, KJ Osborne at home against the Packers, and then Dalton Kincaid in the FFPC. Tight end premium scoring. I'm going to tell you Kincaid right away. I'm a little bit nervous about Jordan Addison's ankle, but I still think he's going to go, which would make Osborne the third option on that team. So I don't know if I can go forward with him. Demarcus Robinson's been sneaky good the last 2 or 3 weeks. Out touching Tutu Atwell, a guy that has, he didn't have the big effect on Puka Nacua last week, but he has been getting in the end zone. Stafford's looking towards him. I think I'm going to say Robinson and Kincaid here, Ferrell.
Oh, he gets two of these guys. Well, he doesn't have a problem at all, John Terry. And Demarcus Robinson is the player, is one of the several receivers that Kansas City is missing this year. And he's an elongated player that makes great touches. He's gotten better every year, and he's always been around the 40 catch number. But I like the way he's playing. And, we think about him. We've had limited exposure to him on the field as a percent of snaps. But this player is one of those wily veterans that he's 29 years old, and he's reacting. He's around a team of superior wide receivers, and he knows how to get open. And, you've got a quarterback here that knows how to go through the progressions, and you've got a good offensive line. You got a run game that's clicking, and, he's tall and long, and he catches touchdowns, plucks the ball out of the air. That's the guy you want. You're probably right. Didn't Kincaid – Osborne looked really, really good last week.
Well, I don't know. Listen. Did Osborne look really, really good?
I thought he did.
I'm going to look that up.
I don't have the numerical background to give you that, but from what I can remember, and I apologize for not seeming so mathematically prepared tonight, but it's been a weird day in the transfer portal, Balky. That's all I can tell you.
Isn't every day a weird day in the transfer
portal? Yeah,
but
this is loading up, my friend. It's just loading up.
You were right, though. Your brain was not scrambled enough to not remember this. 5 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown.
Hard to shoot the horse that wins the race, Paul.
And yeah, exactly. And I'm going to say this too, like Hudson Reeve, I'm of one mind with him on this. You only play KJ Osborne if Addison doesn't play. The problem is that is the Sunday night game. So you're not going to be able to know, officially at least, about Addison until, whatever that is.
Hudson Kern Reed believes that there's only an opportunity to feed one receiver there.
Right. And as John Terry points out too, the new quarterback concerns him. Jaron Hall, we don't know. Maybe he's really good. Maybe he stinks. We don't know. Now, the Packers defense is any kind of indicator. You would think that he's going to be pretty good on Sunday night and throw for a lot of yards, but we don't know that for sure.
Jaron Hall, lock on your first receiver and throw the ball. We'll tuck the ball under his arm and take off running. But again, this makes me think Osborne would be the play here. Quick release to the receiver and the crossing route would be in order here. I like Osborne this week.
For what it's worth, the last time that the Vikings played the Packers, the first meeting this year, Justin Jefferson did not play in that game, but Osborne did catch 8 balls for 99 yards. So there is that as well. If you want to roll the dice, put it this way. If you're playing in the main event of Fantasy Pros Championship, the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship main event, you need to make up some scores or some points. Then I think you can make the case for having Osborne be your starter there at that point.
What are you talking about rolling the dice? You got plans for after the show?
No.
You got me a little excited there.
Well, Ferrell, someday soon, you and I will roll the dice
there you go.
For hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars.
Well, let's go crazy now.
Let's go crazy indeed. I'll tell you a guy who's going crazy right now because he's only 3 days away from finding out whether he's going to be an FFPC millionaire. Let's bring him in right now, ladies and gentlemen. He's only been playing in the FFPC season-long competitions for 4 years, but he's already got multiple league titles to his name, both at the FFPC level and the FPC level. Right now, he stands above everybody else heading into Week 17 of the FFPC main event. The driver's seat is occupied by him in the chase for the $1 million grand prize, and we got him on the show tonight. Please welcome on to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Sensations franchise owner, Mr. Mike Mann. Mike,
there he is.
Happy early New Year to you. Thanks for joining us tonight, man.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ferrell. Appreciate you having me.
Good to see you. Where did your Sensations name come from? I mean,
I'm a lifelong Saints fan.
Oh, then I know.
Yeah.
Then I know. I did a long time ago, standing next to Kenny Stabler in a watering spot in New Orleans, and a girl flashed her eyes at me and said, "I'm a Sensation." And that'll sell you on a lot of things right there, buddy. Congratulations. And Balky, this is a kind of man from New Orleans that you would expect to come in and to not be concerned about the mojo or the situation or what he might bring to his team. He shows up. He's bringing it out. He's basically here to talk about it. He's not worried about anything. He's coming in to win. He's likely. You come back next week and talk about winning, will you?
Right. That's the thing. That's the thing, Mike. So number one, thanks for coming on. Number two, we're excited to have you because a lot of times this year, people who are in the top 5, top 10, or even leading the whole thing like you are, they don't want to come on. They don't want to jinx it. But you're like, you know what?
In fear.
Jinxes be darned. I got myself up here at this point. I'm going to go out and win the whole darn thing. So thank you for hopping aboard tonight. Can I ask you, so number one, I want you to tell us a little bit about your profession, your career, and if there's any fantasy football crossover there, that would be cool. If not, no big deal. And then number two, you look at the leaderboard heading into this week or after the Monday night game, and you see yourself up at the top. Tell us what that feeling's like.
Yeah, a little nervous. Happy to be on top, but know that there's a lot of solid teams right behind me. A lot of people behind me have a lot of players in that Detroit-Dallas game, which could shoot out. So not feeling great being in the leader seat, but football's a weird game and anything can happen. And so we'll see. I'd rather be in first place than second or third or further down the leaderboard. So
it's always better to be up at the top. That's right.
Every point matters.
Every point does matter. And I'll tell you what, a guy who actually was on the show just a few weeks ago when he was up at the top of the Fantasy Pros Championship chiming in right now. And Mike, I'll throw this to you first. Ferrell, you can weigh in on it. But he's got a choice between David Montgomery and Najee Harris this week. Now, Mike, you just said you're worried about these guys below you on the leaderboard that have a lot of action in that Lions-Cowboys game. So you're obviously nervous about what could happen in that game. It's the highest total of the week, 52.5. Najee Harris, to me, is still splitting time with Jaylen Warren. And if you can't tell, this is a leading way of telling you I would rather play Montgomery over Harris this week. Mike, what would you rather do?
I'm the same way. I mean, I know Gibbs had the big game last week, but I think part of that, I think Montgomery maybe came out of the game for a few series, and that's where Gibbs really stepped up. So, that could have easily been Montgomery getting a few goal line touchdowns. So I think both those guys are good plays, and that's going to be a game with a lot of points. So I think I'd lean towards Montgomery as well.
Yeah, Montgomery for both of us. Farrell, you're saying Montgomery as well?
Easy choice. Harris has been the mystery man, although that's a good question for you because it's been rare to find guys that liked Harris. A lot of guys were completely off of him going into the draft. Like that's something you don't know. But I our event here in Kentucky and the FFPC live in Las Vegas draws a great group from the breadbasket of professional football, Ohio. And everyone is excited about the Browns, the core Browns fans, Jason Kahn and John Anderson and those guys, Balky. But, it was hard to find amongst the pool of players in Las Vegas and here. It was difficult to find anybody that was really willing to jump on the bandwagon and say, Deshaun Watson, all these other Browns, I'm going deep on Browns. The ones on your roster, Cooper, Njoku, Watson, later Flacco picked up off waivers. What makes you such a believer in the Cleveland Browns who have recently made a believer out of all of us?
Yeah, I'm not sure I was, fully on board with Cleveland in the preseason, but I was on board. I think Amari Cooper is a great player. I thought he was he was sliding a little bit in drafts. And I thought, he was going to have a productive year. I always like drafting tight ends with athleticism. So Njoku, I think, is always a solid player. And so it just so happened I got both those guys, and I really wanted to focus on pairing some wide receivers and tight ends with a quarterback. So Deshaun Watson kind of fell to me, and I thought, there's always a chance he can go back to being a top 5 quarterback. So let's just go ahead and roll the dice and see if he can get some of that magic back. Now, Cleveland's been great. Deshaun was a little hit or miss during the year. Mm-hmm. And when he went out for an injury, I said, well, I'm already invested in Cooper and Njoku. Let's just go ahead and get Flacco in there. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea Flacco would do what he's doing right now. I mean,
no one did.
Anyone did.
No.
Yeah,
it's absolutely incredible. Did you get the defense? Did you get the Browns kicker? Where were you on the running backs with Ford and Hunt?
Yeah, I didn't have. I thought Chubb would have a great year. It's really unfortunate what happened with him. I drafted Ford in a bunch of leagues. I don't think he's not on this team, but I think Cleveland's. They're a solid franchise. Obviously, well coached. But yeah, I think Cleveland as a whole has been really showed up. I don't think anyone thought they'd win. They have 10 wins, 11 wins?
11 wins.
11 wins, pretty amazing. So
especially with all
and then last week Flacco had yesterday Flacco had the game of his life. The week before that he had the game of his life. I was just fortunate to play him because I was going to play Cooper and Njoku. I said might as well play Flacco with him.
And you got Flacco and you're starting him over. Who'd you start him over on your team?
Kyler Murray.
Yeah, that's an easy choice. Good job.
Yeah.
But you have Kyler Murray in there right now, right?
I benched Flacco Thursday night. I was a little bit on the fence. And then when Cooper was ruled out, I took Flacco out. I think Murray could have a good week. But yeah, looking back at it, probably, wish I would have played Flacco.
Were you drinking heavily?
Farrell, I'm going to stop you on this one. So, Mike, I'm with you on this. We didn't know, and Kyler Murray's sick right now. We think he's going to play, but we'll find out. But Flacco was going up against the Jets defense, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, without Amari Cooper. If you saw what he did last night coming, then go out and
Yeah.
buy a lottery ticket and get. I'll
Oh,
give you
no,
money.
no.
I'm telling you,
The
like
Jets,
I can.
the Jets give up 180 yards a
Right.
game or something like that, and Flacco almost had 300 in the first half.
It's unbelievable. I never in a million. They play that game 100 times. That result comes up 1, maybe 2 times of what we saw last. And honestly, the second half of that game last night, that was kind of what we expected, right? A knockdown, drag it out, slugfest, brick rock fight between two teams. You saw all these touchdowns scored in the first half. You saw none scored in the second half. So I don't fault you at all for sitting Flacco in favor of Kyler Murray. And as the Dizzle's pointing out, Murray's going to throw for a ton this week as long as he plays. You got to listen. He's got it. Fluids, IV, rest. Get his butt on the field against Philly this week. That's what you got to hope for at this point. Hey, I want to go back to the YouTube chat right now, guys, real quick for another question from our buddy. I believe this is Dom Gazzetti's question. He had a quarterback question. Yeah, it is Dom. He's faced with the same decision he's been looking at the last couple of weeks at quarterback, Baker Mayfield and Tua Tagovailoa. Baker Mayfield at home against your Saints, Mike, and then Tua Tagovailoa goes on the road against the Ravens. I'm kind of with the Dizzle on this one. He says he prefers Baker Mayfield. I think I do too. Mike, I know this is weird. If you were faced this decision, Tua Tagovailoa probably carried you throughout most of the season, but Baker Mayfield's been white hot right now. He's got another good matchup this week in the Saints. I think I'd play Mayfield over Tagovailoa. What would you do, man?
Yeah, I think that Saints-Bucks game has a chance to be pretty high scoring. So I think I'd probably lean towards Baker. You get a little bit of rushing upside, but I don't think you can go wrong. I think both those guys will do well.
I would never want to start a quarterback against that Baltimore defense.
Right.
That's just what I think. So yeah, and Baker's got a complement of great wide receivers who are getting healthy. Doesn't necessarily have a tight end, but I don't know if he needs it.
Right. He may not. Let's do this. I know we don't like to talk about drafts this late in the year, but I'm always kind of curious at how people constructed their teams. Mm-hmm. And I look at what you did here, Mike, and we had John Donaldson on last week, and he waited till, God, I want to say the 9th or the 10th round to take his first tight end, and it was David Njoku. You did the same thing in this draft. You waited until the 8th round to take Njoku. 2 running backs, 5 wide receivers in your first 7 rounds. No quarterbacks or tight ends in there. Is that normal for how you like to build your teams in the FFPC? Was this kind of an outlier, or is this, is positional structure in the first 8 or 9 rounds not something of high import to you when you're drafting your teams?
Yeah, I'll usually wait for running backs and tight ends. I feel like you can usually find some guys late in the drafts and in free agency that can kind of suit your team well. I mean, this year you got CJ Stroud. I mean, you got Joe Flacco on my team. Tight ends, you got Njoku, you got Trey McBride. Those guys I think you can field. Running back same way. I mean, there's so many running back injuries. So I think you can wait to draft those positions and really focus on getting some pass catchers in there. It's not how I always do it. If a top quarterback will falls a little bit. I mean, I think I had a team that I drafted Josh Allen in the middle of the 3rd round. I had drafted Stephon Diggs in the 1st round, wanted to pair him with his quarterback. So every once in a while, I'll jump on a top tier quarterbacks, but if I don't get one of those top 2 or 3 guys, I'll wait and go with a Watson, go with he got hurt, but a Kirk Cousins or something like that, and just roll that way.
And that's right, Mike, because the recipe for success in 2022 said get you one of those top quarterbacks. FFPC get you one of those top tight ends, but that wasn't. It didn't. Every year is different, and this year has been completely different. So I like what you did there. You mentioned Stephon Diggs. Buffalo finally turns to some semblance of a rushing game, and all of a sudden, what we think is one of the better receivers in the game and a fantasy producer excellence disappears. What's going on with the Bills and Stephon Diggs? And is there a situation now that, like you said, get some pass catchers? Are your pass catchers you drafted further on down the line, are you going to play them in front of Diggs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what Joe Brady, former LSU coach, their offensive coordinator now. Ever since he was installed, calling plays, the offense is running through James Cook. So there's definitely concern there with Steph Diggs. I mean, you also got Belichick on the other side, who normally likes to take away that top option for the other team.
Good point.
So yeah, I guess you got to be concerned, but it's still Stephon Diggs. I mean, it's not like he's forgotten how to get open. He hadn't forgotten how to catch. I mean, it's still the top receiver in one of the top offenses with the top quarterback in the NFL. So I think if you have him, you got to play him.
What bothers me about him is he's not a guy that handles the second fiddle. Balky and I were talking a couple of weeks ago. When do we know that Mike Evans has 2 bad games in a row? It's a new week. Diggs seems to keep a little chip on his shoulder about not being the guy all the time, and that's what troubles me about him. So yeah, it
does seem also like some of those other top receivers, they scheme to get the ball to those guys, like the Amon St. Brown.
Oh yeah,
they Justin Lamb. Jefferson. I mean, they are CeeDee Lamb. It seems like the Bills are just good with whoever's open's getting the ball. Josh Allen's not necessarily just forcing it to him. So I may be wrong. I haven't watched all the Bills plays, but it seems like those other guys they're putting a concerted effort into.
Yeah, you don't always do that with Buffalo. Go ahead.
In that same theme, guys, and nobody's brought it up in the chat room, so I'll just throw one out there. Devontae Adams is coming off a dreadful game. Mm-hmm. What do you do with him this coming week? Would it be 2 in a row? I don't think he turns 2 bad games in a row. So it's just a thought.
Yeah, Raiders at the Indianapolis Colts this week at a 1 o'clock game on. I think that's more compelling too. I think it's much more difficult to bench Diggs. I think Devontae Adams is a little bit more fungible as far as whether you want to start him or bench him, given his quarterback situation, given the fact that that offense is nowhere near at the level of Buffalo. Although Zamir White looked pretty good running the ball last week in Josh Jacobs' place. So there is something to be said for that as well. Let's go to the chat room. It's Hazel hanging out watching us on YouTube tonight. Any opinions on Clyde Edwards-Helaire? All DNPs this week, but it's because of sickness. And Isaiah Pacheco, lo and behold, he comes in and quietly has a limited practice today coming off the concussion. Now, currently, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is in It's Hazel's flex. Mike, any insight on this Chiefs situation? Because this is a 4:25 game on Sunday, and you're just not going to have the luxury to wait until inactives are out.
Yeah, I was dead wrong on this when Pacheco went down with the shoulder injury. I picked up Deneric Prince in a bunch of leagues. Who's maybe he was like the 4th running back because I thought CEH was toast. I mean, I thought he was done. I didn't think they would go. I thought they'd bring in a new young leg. So I was dead wrong on that. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire looked great that 1 week where he was the starter. So I don't know if you have some flexibility on being able to wait for that 3:30 kickoff. I would hold off, but I don't know if you can risk it. Pacheco's seems like a warrior, and he's going to play in what seems like kind of almost like a must-win for Kansas City. Yeah. So,
Mike,
John Terry coming in with there, Balky.
John Terry talking about LaMichael Pirine?
LaMichael Pirine. Now, fellas, this is a player that has had 11 transactions on and off the practice squad and roster this year. He's carried the ball 1 time. And based on what's happening this year, John Terry might be right. LaMichael Pirine, 100 yards this weekend. It's facts. It's just going to, it's anything could possibly happen. I don't think anyone has rostered LaMichael Pirine. And the Chiefs have been reluctant to do it 11 times. They can't stay it. But I felt I've never seen a player move on and off a roster 11 times in one season.
That is bizarre. And certainly he is getting his money's worth with U-Haul or whatever he's doing with moving everything around. Mike, what if I frame it this way? What if you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Isaiah Pacheco? Do you just wait? And if Pacheco's active, you play Pacheco. And if he's inactive, you play Edwards-Helaire. Is it that simple?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, Pacheco's just way more talented at this point.
And Hudson Kern Reeves saying that John Terry should start LaMichael Pirine this week. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Ty R, who is hanging out on YouTube watching us tonight. He's 302nd in the main event, just 301 spots behind you, Mike. So you can give him real advice. You don't have to mislead him here. He's 22 points out of the top 150, thanks to Cortland Sutton's 0 and benching George Pickens last week. You know what? He's got. I thought we had an email on this. Maybe I had the email last night on the show. But Stafford and CJ Stroud are his two quarterbacks that he's deciding between this week. Matthew Stafford at the Giants, CJ Stroud coming off the concussion or out of the concussion protocol to take on the Titans at home. Mike, to me, this is pretty close. I think I lean towards Stroud because I think there's a little bit more upside with him putting up a big score, which is what he needs to try to get into the top 150. What are your thoughts on Stroud versus Stafford this week if you're trying to vault up the leaderboard?
Yeah, I'd agree. I also would look at it not necessarily down 22 points out of the top 150, but you're down 152 positions. So you're having to outscore 152 teams plus all the teams behind you. So I would definitely go towards the upside. I'm not afraid to start Stroud at this point. I think he'll hit the ground running. You know, number 5 or 6. QB 5 or 6 for the year before he went down.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be afraid to start him at all.
Yeah. Curran always also chiming in. It's all upside at this stage. So he's saying start Stroud as well. Speaking of upside, because the Packers rush defense has not only been historically bad this season, but over the last 2 or 3 years, is Ty Chandler a must start in the FFPC main event Fantasy Pros Championship this week? Final week of the championship round. Mike, I think you have him in your starting lineup. How good do you feel about him this week?
I do. I don't know if he's a must start for me because I don't have a ton of options at this point. Like the injury bug kind of hit my team, but I don't know. The only thing I worry about him is with Jalen Hall starting. You just don't know. And if they go down a little bit, if they go down a couple scores, how many opportunities is Ty Chandler going to get? Is he going to be in there for pass protection? I know earlier on in the season, he was really struggling with that, and they were using, they had Madison, and they use the fullback a bunch for pass protection as well. So is he going to get any dump offs? So that's the only thing I worry about is kind of the game script with that game. If the Packers go up early, do a situation like last week where Ty Chandler, he salvaged a decent game by getting a goal line touchdown, but he was really not much involved in that game because they were throwing so much.
Well,
so that's how he fails, I think, if that happens.
I like your commentary on Stroud, so let's stay with the Texans a little bit. Dalton Schultz came back, had a big game, contributed well. What would you do? Singletary has been fantastic, and I'm not so sure everybody is getting him off the benches either. And he's been a wonderful player in these last few weeks. Who do you like? Or essentially, would you put all these Texans in? We expect Stroud to have a big game. Obviously, we expect upside for the receivers that are left and the tight end. You feel the same way?
Yeah, I would absolutely play Nico Collins.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably lean towards, if I had Stroud and I had a second piece there, either Schultz or Brown or even Singletary. I would feel confident starting those guys.
As we look at
Schultz
2024,
he's on my team. He's got a little bit. The Titans have been pretty good against the tight end position this year, so I'm a little bit nervous for that. But but I would not hesitate to play Stroud and Nico Collins at all.
When you look at this Texans team, man, they're going to fly off the board in the 2024 drafts, don't you think? I mean, what you've seen this year with him, I mean, you talk about overpaying. They might be the early darlings of the best ball leagues.
Yeah, Tank Dell too.
Yeah. Tank Dell's another interesting guy. Like the Texans, I was talking with Dizzle about this today. I think it's fascinating to think about what's going to happen in these drafts that launch with the FFPC coming up next month. Not only with the Texans, but some of these other up and coming teams and the tight ends. Kelsey, another year older. Hawkinson is going to come into the season injured. Then you have the rookie tight ends with Kincaid and Laporta and Musgrave and Mayer and, all these other guys. And then Trey McBride, who really has come on. And I know, Mike, you know this firsthand. He's been on your team, a mainstay in your lineup too. I think that's going to be fascinating to watch as we go forward here. Let's go to Kyle Couch right now. He is in third place in the Fantasy Pros Championship round. He's got to decide between, he doesn't have to decide between, but your thoughts sort of on the Lions, Mike. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. We didn't get into it, but Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, are all these guys good starts if you're trying to protect the lead and still try to put up points?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that Dallas-Detroit game has a chance to be the highest scoring game. Is it the highest total for this week?
It is.
According to Vegas, I'm guessing it probably will be. I mean, the only thing I would worry about that is Gibbs and Montgomery eating into each other. So I might be a little bit nervous to play both those guys if you're sitting there in third place and making it to the ground. I'd probably lean towards Gibbs a little bit and just hope the game really goes off. Dallas scores. Gibbs is catching a bunch of passes.
And I think like that, I mean, quite frankly, that could be like a 35-31 type game. Like you know, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. Even as good as Dallas's defense has been, Detroit is really talented on offense. We got some news today, Mike, that Jalen Waddle is going to be out for week 17. Does this change anything for you? I mean, are you now benching or starting any of your Dolphins, differently than you would have with Waddle? I think about guys like Mostert, Achane, and Tagovailoa, I think are the big guys. It obviously didn't affect him at all. It probably doesn't affect Mostert, but guys like Achane, guys like Tagovailoa, does this Waddle thing change anything for you?
I know Achane hasn't looked as good recently, but Dolphins need playmakers, and he's one of those guys that can, break one. I think they could use him a little bit more as a receiving role. Maybe some of these bubble screens or out of the backfield. I kind of think Achane might be a nice sneaky play. And then Mostert's hurt, banged up a little bit. So, maybe he gets a couple more carries. I think we'll get Jeff Wilson involved probably if those guys aren't fully healthy or don't even play. But I don't know. I mean, the obvious choice is to go into the Cedric Wilson and maybe step in for Waddle. But I think maybe Achane will a couple more targets, a couple more catches. So I would maybe, if you're kind of on the fence with that one, I would maybe look at him.
I remain a big Cedric Wilson fan, Balky, at that position. But yeah, they're going to need Johnny All-Player to step up in Miami to beat this Baltimore team. So that's exactly, man. There's a lot of difficult start 'em and set 'ems going on. You mentioned one team you had that's injury riddled, and so your decisions aren't that difficult. Sometimes that's a blessing. What's your toughest decision this weekend? What's the thing that's really going to trouble you? And it can be with this team that sits in first, but you have other teams too. I mean, just one that will keep the professor and John Terry up all night.
Well, I mean, my hardest decision has already happened where I benched Flacco for Kyler Murray.
Well, Balky was all behind that.
I still am. Trust the process.
Yeah.
We wouldn't use the points even if you could get them. Balky would not take them.
I know. And I was dreaming big. I thought maybe there'd be a chance Marquise Brown maybe came back this week after a week off. And, the Eagles defense has been a little bit not as good this year. So that's what I was kind of thinking with Kyler Murray. Got Trey McBride in there. Was going to maybe sneak in Marquise Brown for a big play. But I don't have to worry about that. But, yeah, Waddle being out. If for some reason Pittman doesn't play, I have Josh Downs there. Maybe I consider putting him in. But for the most part, with the injuries that I've had at receiver, it's pretty much just plug and play at this point.
You have been a wonderful guest, and I completely regret asking you that question because you've had so he's trying to make up a tough thing, and he can't get to that. because he's just, you're having such a blessed season, and it's been. And I tell you, the biggest blessing of your season is McBride. Balky ran off a list of tight ends and young tight ends, and they are impressive. The top guys with Andrews gone, Kelsey, Laporta, Kittle, and Ingram, and there's going to be a switch next year. But man, you take what you've done with McBride, 9 targets a game, 57 catches since he took over from Ertz, which projects to possibly 300 catches for the season. It's just been fantastic. He hadn't found the end zone much, and maybe that's why you don't need Wilson back. You've got the player you need to line up with your quarterback, is what I'm saying.
Yep, that's right.
Couple of emails here for you, Mike, and I'll lead things off with a Zay Flowers question here. This is from Kevin in Omaha, Nebraska. How confident are you starting a banged up Flowers with everything on the line this weekend? Thank you, Kevin. We appreciate the email. Yeah, Zay Flowers is banged up, listed as questionable. He gets the Dolphins at home this week, and I should have looked up his injury status as far as whether – I know he did not practice Wednesday. I know he did not practice Thursday. He's listed as questionable. He did practice today. Okay. So how confident are you, Mike, in starting Zay Flowers in championship week?
That's probably the game that's hardest, I think, they're out right now. What's going to happen in that Ravens-Dolphins game? Both teams are banged up. If this was 3-4 weeks ago, I would say that would be a really high-scoring game. There'd be fireworks going off in that game. But I just don't know. I mean, both defenses are good. They're both banged up. That game look like. So I think Flowers has a really high floor. He's going to get peppered with some targets there. You got Odell is kind of the deep threat there. You got Isaiah Likely. So he's competing a little bit with targets, but I think he's got a pretty high floor. So I'd feel good if you just needed a solid, 10, 15 points. I think he'll get there for you. And then, who knows, maybe he, catches 2 touchdowns. He's certainly a talented player.
And they use him in a variety of ways, which gives that big play possibility, maybe a little bit higher of likelihood of happening with him as opposed to some of the other guys that you might have on your team. Ferrell, the only other email I have for Mike here is from Walt in Portland, and it's about Stephon Diggs, which we already talked about. Mm-hmm. So I will move on past Walt. Hopefully your question's already been answered. We appreciate the email. And I'll go right into you, my friend, to have your final question here for Mike Mann tonight.
Okay, my final question, and I'll put this before I ask the question. I'll put this out there. A trainer once told me the little guys heal quicker. So for whatever that's worth, all 180 pounds of Flowers will heal.
He's probably already healed.
He's probably
he's probably just fine. Yeah. Get off of your teams and look around the league. Tell us who you would not start this weekend. And I think it's difficult in this week, the next to last game of the season, and a very, very meaningful week in fantasy football because it is our finale. It's difficult to find players who aren't going to produce. But who's the one that a good name that you would take out of your lineup? And then are you going to be like John Terry and get LaMichael Pirine in your, give us a name that nobody's banking on to deliver?
Okay. Let's see here. I think I'll start with the second part first, is maybe some sleepers. We mentioned Octane. I think I'd be slipping him in. I don't know if a lot of people are playing him, but I think, guys with that kind of upside and some better opportunities with, someone coming out this last week of this, or second to last week of the NFL season, last week of the fantasy season. I think it's all about the opportunities that guys are going to get. There's so many people banged up. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of targets, a lot of carries that are funneled towards people that maybe wouldn't necessarily get it. So I'd look towards those people. Gerald Everett, I think maybe, looking at that Chargers team, who's going to catch the ball? I mean, they're going to throw the ball a bunch. Keenan Allen's out, Josh Palmer's out. It'd be easy to go towards those receivers, but I'd look to Gerald Everett as maybe a possible sleeper starter.
Good.
The Eagles, all the good offense have great matchups. Eagles, DeAndre Swift, I think that's a really good play. Start all your 49ers. But who would I not start? It's kind of obvious. Any quarterback question Jaguars. I would probably stay away from any Jaguars. I'd stay away from Redskins. Some of those guys, I wouldn't be afraid to bench some of those guys.
And I think that's all solid advice. And I think you're right. It's so difficult when you're talking about no teams on bye, basically as full of strength as you can get for week 17. It's tough to say, yeah, this guy was great, but I don't like how he's been playing the last week or two, and he's got a bad matchup this week. It's tough to say, like, okay, yeah, let's sit him this week.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things, and I know you got the words of encouragement from Nick Costantino in the YouTube chat tonight, Mike, a guy who is 1/3 of the last two winners of the FFPC main event, the first ever FFPC main event millionaires. He gave you the words of encouragement tonight. And sometimes I think that having a shallow team or a team that like you have this week with Amari Cooper out, Jalen Waddle out, it makes the lineup decisions a little bit easier. And it makes it kind of like, no matter what happens, like, look, you did what you could, based on the information given to you, and whatever happens, happens. And exactly. I certainly hope, kidding aside, the fact that you came on here December 29th, 2023, when you are hours away from potentially being an FFPC millionaire, speaks volumes about your confidence. It speaks volumes about the level of recreation that you have and enjoy playing this game. And I certainly hope you end up winning the $1 million in the FFPC main event. There's a lot of people I hope win the $1 million, but you are right at the top of that list right now, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. We certainly appreciate it. Enjoy week 17 and have a hopefully really happy 2024.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
You got it. That's Mike Mann, the Saint Sations franchise owner.
Love that name.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour tonight. Yeah, lifelong Saints fan, comes in tonight and does a great job, and a lot of good advice from him as well. Let's Ferrell, as we are getting into championship week, we have a few minutes left, and I want to get to as many start-sit questions as we can because, quite frankly, that's why everybody's tuning in tonight, is to hear what we say about this, about what they should be doing in their lineups. Aaron in St. Teresa, New Mexico, has a Fantasy Pros Championship team that he's trying to move up the leaderboard. Cade Otton or Logan Thomas this weekend as his flex. Now, Cade Otton and Logan Thomas, neither one of these guys are top 12 tight ends, but if you're looking as a flex, Logan Thomas at home against the Niners, or Cade Otton also at home against the Saints. Ferrell, do you have a feeling here between these two players?
Cade Otton has been targeted around the goal line, and if the Saints are going to figure out Baker Mayfield, they're going to try to frustrate those receivers. I'm going to go with Otton and hope for a touchdown.
I think that's the way I go. Like, I come into this, like, after what happened to the Niners on Monday Night Football, I know they're on a short week, and I know this is kind of like lazy analysis, but it's tough for me to see a team as good and as veteran-laden as they are to come in and not be all kinds of pissed off against the Commanders this week. So I don't know how much Logan Thomas gets. I think I would be hoping for Cade Otton to fall into the end zone as well. What about this one? Now, this is an interesting one. Speaking of the Niners, Ben in Chicago. I've gotten Patrick Mahomes to my title game, but Brock Purdy has really brought me there. Do I bench Mahomes for Purdy? Happy New Year, Ben in Chicago. From the tone of that email, Ferrell, I'm assuming that he has already benched Mahomes for Purdy, probably multiple weeks this year. Does he do it again in championship week?
Correct me if I am wrong, Balky. The Cincinnati Bengals are on the schedule this week. Is that right?
Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. That game is in Kansas City.
You got to love it. On a team that needs a fix, Patrick Mahomes and his tight end go against the Cincinnati Bengals, whose tight end defense is non-existent. The interior, the slot corners, the safeties, they point at the end zone and say, this is where you should go to score. This could be a record game. But Kelsey's had one touchdown in the last 8 or 9 games. He may get 3 this weekend. This is the game where Mahomes fixes it for their playoff run. Their Purdy's situation is there's within a scoring number that he could get. He does. The game is designed for him to put up 25 fantasy points. Mahomes may get 30, 35.
Travis Kelce, you are right. 1 touchdown in his last 8 games. He's only got 5 on the season, and 4 of them came in the first 7 weeks.
It's been very ordinary performances for him, and he's got to get straight. And the frustration that they had, this is the perfect opponent to do that with. Their pass rush, and I don't think Hendrickson is available to Cincinnati this weekend. Even if he is, he's somewhat compromised. That's their sack leader. I really like this game for the Chiefs.
What about this? Speaking of like stuff we would never ask in week 1 of the fantasy season, we're asking this in week 17. Let's go with Doug in Pioneer, California. Am I overthinking this? I feel like I should start Chuba Hubbard and bench Derrick Henry. Now this is intense here. And I always get a little bit nervous. I think Dizzle was alluding to this with Kyle Couch's question about being 3rd place in the Fantasy Pros Championship. Like, look, there's way too much cash on the line for me to weigh in on this. But this is an interesting one. This is championship week. Are you going to bench Derrick Henry, who goes on the road to Houston, Texas, to play the Texans in favor of Chuba Hubbard, who is going to be at home, on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who will not have Trevor Lawrence, might set up as a positive game script for Hubbard? How do you weigh in on this?
Fantasy point scoring over the last 5 weeks or so have been similar to these for both these players. If you think about how they get there, Hubbard has like 5 touchdowns over the last 5 games. Henry is much the same. Henry's going to throw you a couple touchdowns, maybe 2 this year. You say, well, Henry, Hubbard catches more passes than Henry. Not really. Hubbard hasn't been a pass catcher. Henry has caught some passes, hasn't done much with them. But here's the wild card. Levis is coming back. Levis is playing this weekend. And so I am going to easily dismiss Hubbard. I would look to get Hubbard in my lineup some other way because I'm not going to put Henry on the bench. And I wish the game is on the road, correct? It's down in Texas.
Game is in Houston, yes.
Yeah, and, Henry is a better player at home, but, I'm solid behind Henry with what he can produce. That's where I want to put my efforts in this week to stay at the top, or as Mr. Mann described, you have to jump over so many teams to get there. That Henry's the guy that you're going to rely on. And
right.
The Dizzle's talking about me playing roulette. First of all, we started with French words, and I guess we're going to end with French words. I walk past roulette tables all the time, Dizzle. You know this, but there's real reasons. It's not because he hasn't done well. It's Kelce. It's because this is the perfect matchup for him. And Balky, I'm not sure, but I would think that Cincinnati, probably the worst defense in the league against the tight end position. Probably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can look it up after the show.
Right.
But I think they're. So that's what I like.
Just getting back to the Henry thing real quick.
Mm-hmm.
While I am with you and Dizzle, I think you play Henry over Hubbard. It was week 15, 2 weeks ago. Derrick Henry, 16 carries, 9 yards against the Tennessee Titans. Against the Houston Texans, and that was in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he did catch 4 balls, and he gets a touchdown, or 4 balls for 1 yard. He did not get a touchdown. 4 catches for 1 yard, which is tough to do. So I'm putting it out there. Like, I think it's Henry.
Yeah. But it wasn't that the game where they lost the quarterback?
They very well could have been. Yeah. I'd have to look it up, but I think
things kind of go off the rails when that happens.
Let's go off the rails with this final question, or maybe stay on them. It's kind of up to you, Ferrell, however you want to take this.
Yeah, I'll usually go off the rails.
This is Don in Winter Haven, Florida. Happy holidays, guys. I've gone back and forth all week. Drake London or Adam Thielen. Thanks for another great season. That is Don in Winter Haven, Florida. Don, we appreciate you. Thank you for another great season of tuning in and watching the show. So if we look at the wide receiver decision that he's facing this week, you're looking at Adam Thielen again at Jacksonville. Drake London is also on the road. He is in Chicago. Where are you weighing on this? Is it Thielen or is it London, Ferrell?
It's going to be Drake London. Despite everything, despite the situations with the quarterback in Atlanta and the fact that the coach drives us all crazy, it's going to be London because he's a premier athlete emerging for a team that, if I'm correct, through all these things, still has a winning record. The Falcons have a winning record, and they have to rely on London. And Thielen has been a great contributing player who did well in the first of the year. He's 33 years old. He's with a. He's not with the quarterback that he started the year with. I don't think so. We just need to go to where the upside is, and that's London.
I'm going to go London too. And here, let me just bring this up about Thielen. So from week 2 through week 6, 7, 11, 7, 11, and 11 catches. Fantastic, phenomenal stuff. Then they go on by week 8, 8 catches, 5, 6, and 8. Okay. Not as good, but still really good. Then week 12 on 1, 3, 5, 4, and then he gets 6 last week, but that's against the fraudulent Packers defense. So I throw that right out the window. That one doesn't count. 1, 3, 5, and 4. Like I look, especially if you're trying to climb up the leaderboard, I think London is your ticket here. I don't think you're going to win $1 million or anywhere sniff $1 million with Thielen in over Drake London. So I am with you. Drake London here. The Dizzle also chiming in. This is a tough decision for him. The Jags defense is bad. The Bears defense has been good, especially since they traded for Montez Sweat with Washington. Thielen is old. London's young and talented, but the Atlanta coach is a blanking moron. So I don't even know. We didn't get an answer there. It is tough, but Ferrell and I are both saying London. So go with your gut on this one. That's the best advice I can give. That is Don. Yeah, Don in Winter Haven, Florida. Ferrell, what a tremendous 2023 it was hanging out Friday nights with you. We've laughed. We've cried again. We've gotten angry. We've gotten sad. We've laughed again, and then we cried some more. It's fantasy football. It's why we love it. I certainly hope with everything that you have going on in Week 17 with all your teams, I hope the ball bounces your way. Hopefully it is a very prosperous Week 17. We will continue to go to the kffsc.com, register for those Super Sunday games, which are coming up. You're looking at what about a month and a half away?
February 10 and 11, 2 big days, Saturday and Sunday. Balky, you'll be there this year, right?
That is the plan.
We had an interloper in the chat. Oh, J.R. Fenton jumped in there. He's probably
really?
coming too. Yeah. And Trevor Holt, who thinks he's getting a bargain on the teams, that's disallowed. But he's coming too. There's a lot of pressure on everybody to come in. I checked in with the real Leroy before the show tonight, and he is coming. And Balky, as long as we get renewed for the upcoming 2024 season, I'll see you in January.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. That is going to be fun. We will be here. We haven't been canceled yet. So as long as we don't get any word, we will be here next Friday with our first show of 2024. KFFSC is the KFFSC.com is the website. Ferrell, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you, man. Ferrell Elliott, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, hopping aboard, co-hosting the show with me tonight, as he does each and every week. I want to thank Mike Mann, our guest and FFPC main event leader heading into Week 17. Ferrell, the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you. As Ferrell stated, we have not been canceled yet. I don't think we're going to be canceled, but stranger things have happened. I will be we'll be back on next Friday at 10 o'clock. In case you missed Tuesday's RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, I got the pleasure to sit down for about an hour with the 9th place overall team in the Fantasy Pros Championship, Mr. Brad Cruz, longtime FFPC player, FFPC champion, KFFSC champion. He helped you get set for your Week 17 lineups. Check that out in the FFPC socials or anywhere you get your podcast in case you missed that. We'll be back live on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern time in case you missed last night's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. That, again, is anywhere on the FFPC socials as well as the Better Sports Network socials. Fantasy Pros Nate Polvolt and I chopped it up for 2 hours leading into that fantasy bonanza of a game between the Browns and Jets. It was a lot of fun. And then this Thursday, we will go live again for 2 hours at 7 o'clock with player profilers Billy Musio. So that's going to be a lot of fun as well. Remember to play the FFPC Weekly Challenge, myffpc.com. 2 of them you can get in by Saturday's kickoff tomorrow night or Sunday's kickoff at 1. Either one of those you can play for $35 or $200, win up to $2,500. And don't forget the world famous playoff challenge is open for entry as well. myffpc.com. Take your shot at a $500,000 grand prize or a $100,000 grand prize. All you need to do is pick your 12 players in the postseason, 1 player per team, set it and forget it, and just watch the points pile up through the postseason, and maybe you'll be taking home that $500,000 grand prize. Remember to like, subscribe, comment on this video, share the video with your friends and enemies, and get notified every time we go live, which will be Tuesday at 10 o'clock with the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Happy New Year to everybody. I hope the ball bounces your way, and championship week, your championship weekend, officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Ferrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Just as a reminder, final reminder, I believe it is, and I'm going to look it up right now just to verify. We do have a Saturday night game this week. It is the Lions and the Cowboys, and it starts at 8:15, so get your lineups in earlier. This is a huge, obviously emotional, highly provocative weekend that we have with championship weekend. Remember, it is just fantasy football. I hope the ball bounces your way. We're talking about life-changing money, but my best advice is enjoy the sweat, enjoy the ride. The journey is its own reward sometimes, and hopefully it will be a very happy new year for you. Thank you for watching so much tonight. We will talk with you again Tuesday. This show comes back again live on Friday at 10 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody.